Lewis, who is the department chair for laboratory and medical science, and she's also the chair of the IRB. And she's been gracious enough to share some time with us to giving us an overview of the IRB process. So without further ado, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. And thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Thank you all for coming. Some of you may or may not know that IRB has been a source of great controversy over the past year. And I'll explain a little bit about that and some of the changes that we've made over the past year and some of the things we have going forward. And so please, I want this to be really informal. I should have asked you to move forward, like we do our students, but anyway. So just interrupt me at any time if you have a question or you have a concern or something that's not clear. I'm going to cover a whole lot of information. The only thing I'm a bit disappointed on is the ICE last week. We had an IRB committee meeting on Tuesday and we were going to approve the electronic form to put out there. And without the committee's approval, I really didn't think it was right for me to put it out there today. So that should be after spring break. I think we should get that up and running. It's not allowing. Okay, so as a basic premise, all human subjects research must have IRB approval prior to beginning the research project. I think that's a given. We are attempting to move our Committee for Protection of Human Subjects to helping to educate our entire community on doing the right thing, making the right choices, and having their proposal pretty much approval ready prior to getting to the committee. And I'll show you some of the things that we're doing to help support faculty's ability to get their proposals to that part. The Human Subjects IRB Committee, they're the ones that will review the proposal and make approvals. Any activity that involves research with human subjects that is conducted by a system member. Welcome, folks. Please join us. This is very informal. Dr. Leach is a former member of our committee, and we're glad to have her here. And the pizza's up front. So any research that's conducted by a system member personnel in the course of their employment. So faculty can be PIs, staff can be PIs, or anyone that uses member facilities. You must be faculty or staff or hold a research appointment at Tarleton in order to be considered a PI. If you would like to collaborate with someone at another institution, someone from Tarleton will have to be the PI. And we encourage collaboration with other institutions, but again, that Tarleton, we need to have someone that is faculty or staff or a research appointee at Tarleton to be the PI. Yes, sir?
You start asking questions, but what if somebody at another institution invites you to participate? Can you be an investigator on their IRB?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
And if you are not doing anything within the university, using university resources, housing your data here, gathering your subjects here, all of that, you don't need to go through our IRB if it has nothing to do with the university. But if it has to do with the university, if there's any portion of the project that involves the university, you can get their approval and then you can become the PI here and we can facilitate that going through.
So not a separate approval, but using theirs to share with the...
Well, you
Because I just went through this last year, that's why I'm just curious.
You still have to meet our approval requirements, and you still have to do a proposal, and the reason is because, and I'll talk about the audit, the scathing audit once more. The reason is because one of the things we were cited on is that we were not documenting how our proposals met exempt or expedited categories. We have very few full board reviews. The vast majority of our proposals are exempt or expedited, and we had no documentation on how they met. So that proposal form, and especially our online one, will guarantee that we get that documentation that we have done that. And sorry, Like,
And Sally, that's after spring break, we will see that.
it should show up online sometime during that week, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Office of Sponsored Projects and the folks in there that are involved in this. So again, I guess the question also is, I think everyone can figure out what a human subject is. It needs to be a living human subject. And research is the question that might be somewhat puzzling. So when we're talking about defining exactly what research is, we're talking about systematic investigation that you plan. It's not just off the cuff. Research development, testing, evaluation, trying to contribute to generalizable knowledge. So for example, in our department, I have 4 programs that have national accreditation. If I am just collecting survey data from students, employer data, that type of information for quality improvement and accreditation purposes, that is not research. If I choose to take my data and present that at a laboratory educational meeting, okay? Are you okay? Yeah, okay. At an educational meeting, that would make it become research, and I would have had to get IRB approval prior to initiating that project. So when someone comes to me and says, I want to just collect quality improvement information, that is not considered research. It's when we choose to go share that information as generalizable knowledge. If my accreditation group requires me to put outcomes on my website or somewhere that future students can look at and make decisions to compare programs, that is not considered generalizable knowledge. That is simply considered maintaining my program's accreditation. So I don't have to get IRB approval for that. If you have any questions specifically about any of your areas, I'd be more than happy to answer those, or you can shoot me an email. But that, hopefully that'll help you to distinguish.
Class projects that do not result in any publication.
Do not require IRB approval. If you have no plans to share generalizable knowledge, that does not require IRB approval. If you have it's a graduate project and you think your grad student might want to get a publication out of it, I would suggest you go ahead and get that approval. But no, that is not considered research.
Is the Tarleton Research Symposium, is that considered research?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and even though it is internal, it's the whole purpose of that symposium is to disseminate generalizable knowledge and promote our research. So,
Sally, what if you have secondary data that was provided that was collected in the scope of evaluating programs with no intention of being published, but then you find out, hey, that fits a pretty good research agenda that would possibly be able to be used and be published? For example, my background was all in extension before I came here, so I have tons of evaluation and data that's scholarly and research worthy, but there was an IRB done in the scope of collecting that data because it was collected under extension mission.
The question is, can you protect human subjects? And if you want to put a proposal in and you can demonstrate that you can totally protect the identity of your human subjects, and you can convince the committee of that, that would be acceptable with existing data. It may be difficult for you to do that if the committee feels that you can't explain how a breach of data, how that would impact a particular subject. So if you're correlating grades with job outcomes, and you can convince us that you can do that with no risk or very, very minimal risk, because we're not asking these people's permission, that might be acceptable. For most purposes, existing data is just just that. But if you can convince the committee that you can protect that subject and that it is fair for that subject.
On that note, if you have, let's say that you want to do a comparison between mean grades between 4 sections and semesters, and you're simply going to have aggregate scores that would not be identifiable to specific students, is that
It depends on what your intent is. If your intent fully is to disseminate knowledge, you need to get IRB approval. And you need to, if you're going to recruit subjects via email in your classroom or whatever, you need to give them the option to opt out and not have their grades included.
what about for existing, so you have a new section of a course this semester, you've implemented a new learning strategy or instructional strategy, and you'd like to compare mean scores
I think
with
mean
a
scores
previous
are fine.
semester.
I think there's no risk to the subject with a mean score. It might be potentially if you had a small subject population and you were correlating grades with employment, and someone could particularly identify a particular individual. So I see that as a risk.
Could you talk about the definition of through intervention or interaction with the individual? So what does that mean, and who does the interaction in the context of archival data?
Can I
Please,
keep
I'm sorry.
going?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you would remind me later on when we get to that
That's fine.
section,
Absolutely.
I will address that. Really good questions. Okay, so some things, this is not inclusive, but things that may be human subject research. Certain things are exempt that exist within an educational institution, whether that's a university or a high school or an elementary school or whatever. Surveys and interviews also put your proposal into the exempt category, provided you meet other criteria. In my area, we get a lot of human samples, we get a lot of blood, whatever, and our blood comes de-identified from our hospitals, and that's what our students practice with every day, are de-identified blood and other body fluid samples. And so I get a yearly IRB that exempts if we want to do something with those specimens. They've already been released from other medical institutions. They were de-identified before they ever got to us. So if I want to do something with blood or spinal fluid, I usually have a yearly, and my faculty are able to use those samples. That's just an example. Specimens or data from databases. I know Dr. Leach, her department purchases access to certain databases, so that would certainly be something if you were trying to make generalizable knowledge. Program evaluation, as long as, again, if it's just quality assurance, quality control practices, and you're not trying to disseminate that information out to the general public, if it's just to keep your accreditation or for your own statistics, that's not research. It is if you want to publish that generalizable knowledge. Even if you are in a medical institution like UT Southwestern and you wanted to do a pilot study, the beginning of an FDA-approved drug, and you had a very small number of patients, that would still be considered human subjects, even though it's a pilot study. It's not a full-blown investigation. Classroom research, comparing different modalities of education, online versus traditional, we get a lot of that. That's a very hot topic and under a lot of consideration, and it seems to be applicable in all disciplines. I know my area is really exploring how our online things compare to our face-to-face. Observing or recording private behavior. We may have projects where people get together, focus groups, and they record those focus groups. And so you have to be real careful if you have a hot topic. You have a group of human subjects that are discussing something of a somewhat personal nature, and some of your questions are open-ended that could possibly elicit something personal from one of those human subjects, even though you have everybody sign on the dotted line, I promise not to divulge the private nature of this discussion, you're not going to get all 10 people probably to leave that room and be totally confidential. And so the committee takes that into consideration when you do have focus groups, so you might want to really consider the types of questions you open up to scenarios like that. If you did that interview one-on-one, if Dr. Edwards had subjects and he had them in a private setting and he could record their results in confidence and he could assure that he was protecting the confidentiality of each subject, that would be a different story. And so sometimes when you get focus groups, it causes a little bit of anxiety because some of that protection of the subject is beyond the people that are setting up that study, as much as they want that. And so those are just a few examples. A number of people regulate, obviously the government regulates. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is the part of our government that houses what's called OHAR, or the Office of Human Subjects Research Protection. Federal Regulation 45 CFR Part 46 is a long document that houses all of the governmental regulations relating to human subjects. The common rule was established, and what that does is it ties together different federal regulations in other governmental agencies, and it makes an attempt to have some consistency within the different departments of government in the protection of human services. I'll tell you a little bit more about our audit of last year, but Texas A&M, as they usually frequently do, they need to get their hands on the regulation of human subjects also. And so the system actually has a compliance person. His name is Dr. Bruce Whitney, and Dr. Whitney oversees all areas of system compliance, not only human subjects regulation, export control, IACUC, dealing with the animal protection, and biosafety. And so Dr. Whitney is our liaison from Tarleton in helping us to respond to the system audit, and he's checking on us along the way to make sure we're making progress for the return of the audit. And then we have Tarleton State University's compliance office, and that is housed in the Office of Sponsored Projects. And so the IRB, it's just one of the areas. We also have the animal, the IACUC, and the biosafety committee. In that Office of Sponsored Projects, we also have the Office of Faculty Research and the Student Research and Creative Activities areas. So all those are housed in the Office of Sponsored Projects. Thank goodness our provost allowed us to waive the hiring freeze at Christmas. So we went about 8 months without a compliance person. There was no one in the Office of Sponsored Projects to coordinate compliance. It was simply faculty that had other appointments, really little administrative support at all. And so some of you may remember Mecca Steinruck. She was in the advising office just previously, and before that she was in the registrar's office, and she's been a wonderful addition. She came to us at the beginning of January or so, and so Mecca is coordinating research for biosafety, IACUC, and the IRB. So she's kind of the person that you turn in your proposals to if you have any questions, and she is extremely knowledgeable and gracious. She's been on a really swift learning curve, and she's done a great job. So we're actually getting to the point where instead of addressing just day-to-day concerns, we can work on bigger pictures because we have some administrative support. Roger Whitty is the Director of Faculty Research. Many of you know Roger, and he's a great support. He also serves on the IRB committee, and Dr. Blevins McNaughton and Brian Wyatt are co-directors of the Office of Student Research. These are the folks that are on our committee, and Kent Styron, our risk manager, is on that committee, and he is a great resource, especially when we have projects that involve not only potentially risk to human subjects, but risk to the university itself. And so he is that liaison with the university. For example, somebody in my department wants to do something to some subjects that really might have low impact, may not, the outcomes may not be anything important, but could have bad consequences. For example, we let a TB strain get out on the streets or something like that. So again, Kent Styron is really good at balancing and giving us the university's perspective of risk. Dr. Jordan Barkley was recently added as a representative to replace Leslie Leach in the College of Education. And so Dr. Barkley will be signing all the College of Education proposals, and he will be your liaison for making sure that your proposals are complete. We have a faculty member in education that will probably be the person that reviews those, and that's Dr. Thomas Falkenberry, and he's probably going to review those education proposals to make sure they're ready to go by the time Dean Barkley gets the proposal. And that will make our job a lot easier and we can approve those proposals quicker. Jerry Birch in the College of Business. Jerry is now in Midlothian, but Jerry's absolutely wonderful. So any business folks? So he is a great resource. I serve on a reviewing team with him, and so if you have some questions up front about your proposal, ask him and he'll set you straight up front. Elaine Evans is a representative to Science and Technology. Elaine is a nurse, and she's very, very knowledgeable about science and technology. In science and technology, we don't have a whole lot of human subjects research, because we're not a medical institution. Nursing has some, my department has some, but we don't have a ton. Chris Gerhardt in Liberal and Fine Arts. Chris was new on the committee last year, and he's done an amazing job. And so if you have any questions in that area, Mike Haynes in institutional effectiveness serves on our committee. Mike and Julie in his shop are the ones that are getting our proposals online. When we have a prisoner proposal, Charlie Howard is our man, so Charlie doesn't come to all the meetings, but occasionally we have proposals with prisoners, and he serves as an independent prisoner advocate because we feel like that group of human subjects can't truly represent we don't have someone to represent their voice, so that's what he does. If we had a special project that our committee felt that we did not have the expertise to evaluate, we would ask to bring someone in. If we needed a medical expert or we needed a one-time consultant in an area that we just couldn't handle, that's what we do. We have to have a committee member from outside of our community. Miss Joanne Phillips actually is our person. She truly is wonderful too. She has a background. She has a background in social work, and she knows community relations. Sorry.
Dr. Lewis, I'm monitoring the Zoom participants, and one of them has a question for you.
Yes.
She says, when I use Qualtrics to design a survey to collect alumni contact information and placement, which is used for internal purposes, Qualtrics indicates that I need approval before launching the survey. What is the process of using Qualtrics for internal record?
Dr. Haynes' shop has a rule, number one, that Qualtrics is the official university online survey instrument. That if you're using a survey instrument electronically, you should be using Qualtrics. I don't know about enforceability. I'm not positive if everyone's doing that or not, but that's not really the IRB's concern. I understand the difficulty that you can't get your survey approved if you don't have IRB approval. So we need to work with Dr. Haynes I would think a reasonable thing to do would be for that person to submit a memo to Dr. Haynes explaining why it's not research, no?
No, I just did this twice in the last week. He's got a link on his website that you can put in a simple form that says, this is just being used for administrative purposes. They have an approval committee, and I've had them both approved within 24 hours in both cases.
Yeah, I thought there was a yes, no,
Yeah.
it is or not, so you wouldn't have to get that approval if it was not research.
No, you have to route it, but there's a link. If the first time they try to do it, they'll get a link
Okay.
sent to them, and it'll say, you got to complete this form.
So we should not have to have a proposal if it is not human subjects and research. You shouldn't have to do all that. And then Dr. Snyder, everybody knows and loves Dr. Snyder. He serves as our academic affairs representative and he's also a mathematician, so he brings that math background to our committee. And Roger Whitty serves as our representative of the College of Agriculture. So you probably should get to know these folks if that is your college rep and use them. They would greatly appreciate your questions up front, and it'll save you a lot of time in the future. And so a little bit about the background again, the importance of why we're doing what we're doing. Our current issues are that we had an audit, and it occurred in May of last year, 2014, and we got the results in June of 2014, and they were horrendous. And basically, the outcome of the audit was that Tarleton State University did not have a functioning human subjects protection program. And for many of you guys that have had proposals submitted and that went through the approval channel, that's a bit unsettling, I guess. And so, as in many areas, if you don't have documentation, you can't support your claim that you truly did. We had numerous proposals that were approved in the prior 3 years, and our audit only looked at 3 years. And in the prior 3 years, we had numerous proposals that were approved in the category of exempt or expedited, but they should have been full board review. They involved children, they involved prisoners, they involved things that were high risk. It was pretty bad. And it was so apparent that you could look at the title of the proposals and you could see that there were protected subjects in there. So again, the university had to take a look back and say we need to totally revamp this committee and we need to set in place some controls to document every step of that, the protection. We wrote a new manual. We are updating our policies and procedures as we go along and we educate everyone. We now have review teams that get assigned to your proposals, and there's usually 2 of us. And we have to go and spend probably as much time as you do filling out the silly form to document the review. Typically, we give our recommendations to Mecca, and she contacts you and asks you to complete those. Sometimes we contact you ourselves. Sometimes PIs contact me before they submit it and say, would you look at it? And I have a couple things, and when it comes in, it's just completely clean and it's ready to go. I guess we can't get in the habit of previewing every single one. Leslie's going, this takes a lot of time, but I think as we all get better at understanding what we need to do, there are numerous things on the audit that we didn't do. Again, we had no documentation or review. We had nothing that would show why these proposals were put into a particular exemption category or exempt or expedited or so on. We have to actually cite the Federal Register. We have to cite the regulations and say exactly under what rule does this fall. So we just had nothing. So we're pretty much starting from scratch, and half of our committee were new people who could not review a document on their own. So it was up to the people that had been on there a while to help educate everyone. Those of you that are PIs, you know that the city training is not short. So, you've got 5 graduate students shagging after them to get them to do their 5 hours of city training is not the easiest thing. And I apologize, but the system has decided that city is it. We're not taking anything else, so we can't move on from there.
Can I say something just a moment?
Sure.
If you want to be a hero, and if you really want to be a hero, then you have a separate form for those of us who believe that at submission, we are asking for exempt or expedited. Other universities have a separate form for that, and don't kill 7 trees to do the 9-page medical form, which never applies to us.
I totally agree, and our electronic form will route you when you say that you are not going to do something to the subject, that you're doing a survey only. It will route you past the radioactive substances and all that other mess. It will do that. It won't be a separate form because Bruce Whitney has said we cannot have a separate form. That's what he's told us. Now, other schools,
That's ironic because other campuses in the system have other forms.
they haven't been audited and they have not had to deal with Bruce Whitney, is my gut. Because that was the first thing we did ask. The College of Education, has been a strong supporter of that. And I hear you loud and clear. And for our purposes, we would much rather have limit what we have to look at. But that will happen with the electronic form. It won't be a separate form, but it will happen.
I mean, we've had such ridiculous conversations where some of those boxes are pregnant women. Well, it's clearly, are they a pregnant woman participating in some kind of medical study? So we've been asked, how do you know that someone you survey is not pregnant? Well, surveying, I mean, there's such a disconnect between the existing form and...
We actually, that section of what subjects, males, females, minors, older folks, and so on, we've updated that a little bit, and we talked to Bruce Whitney, and his response, it was actually, I think, at an IRB meeting, I asked that question, and what he said was, you'd have to check those boxes if those people potentially will be in your population, and you don't know. So when you have students, you have normal subjects.
So even what city
Because
says.
that's not what the.
That's not what city
Norfolk
says, yes.
And that's not, if we were studying them because they're pregnant, then I would completely understand checking that box. But if they just happen to be pregnant or happen to be male or happen to be whatever, that's not what we're studying. So I'm not sure why we have to focus on.
Dr. Whitney's response to me was, the committee should understand, the people reviewing the form should understand that potentially this population has a pregnant person in it to be able to make a risk assessment. That's
why that medical form is so inappropriate for what we do for exempt and expedited studies. I know.
I'm not,
I preface this, if you want to be a hero.
I will do my best to work on this one.
When you go through the city training and it tells you one thing, and the A&M system requirements are just the opposite of the training that we have received, it makes them look stupid.
I'll tell Dr. Whitney.
That he looks stupid. You can quote me.
Okay, so the audit, and so this is just some brief excerpt. The audit was numerous pages, but the gist of this is we don't have adequate processes and procedures to ensure compliance. And so it goes on and on and on. We don't meet federal requirements. We don't meet A&M system requirements. And potentially for not being in compliance, we potentially could lose any type of federal funding, penalties, loss of research funding. There have been institutions that have lost their funding because they were found to not be in compliance. And so compared to some universities, we may not have a ton of external funding, but we do have some significant external funding that's very, very important. So we don't have a choice but to comply and to get a good audit next time. So to take us to the next step and talk a little bit about the process, over here on the left, I have the person that's responsible for doing these things. First off, the PI, you need to decide if it truly is involving human subjects and it is research. And then you need to decide if it's eligible for exempt or expedited, and I'm going to take you through some great flow charts that help you make that decision. You complete the proposal form, whether it's the written form or the online form. That's going to get submitted to Mecca Steinruck. I'm going to say something really unpopular, but one of the problems that many of A&M systems, and particularly Texas A&M University, had, and they've had numerous audits in several years, and they're kind of in the reform stage, probably 3 years ahead of us. The auditors, when they get a resubmission, have to have the entire packet. And it's a world pain for us as PIs because we've already submitted all of that. But the reason is because we can't have someone in the office like Mecca making the decision of what pages to pull. Is this the 4th version or the 5th version? And you'd be shocked for some of these proposals. We're on the 10th version because the PI doesn't want to make the changes that we're recommending. And so again, we cannot do that. I know Mecca sometimes will remove a staple and attach a signature page to try to help you out so you don't have to go get signatures. We don't acknowledge that goes on, but that kind of thing. But she can't go look up your city training. She doesn't have time to do that, so you need to attach every time the completed packet. The other thing is that the 2 reviewers that reviewed your project, they can do their job a lot quicker if they have everything because they're reviewing a couple proposals at a time. Some of our proposals, for whatever reason, the committee took too darn long to approve it. The semester's gone, we've moved on to a new semester, and the proposals sound like something we've had, but they've made significant changes. So again, you need to have the whole package when you resubmit to Mecca. And the resubmission can be electronic. That's fine. You can use your original form because hunting down people to sign it is kind of a pain. Okay, so then the IRB, Mecca does a clerical review. She looks for city training for everybody that's listed as a research participant. If you have a question on whether somebody needs to be listed as a participant, if they're going to have access to doing something to your subjects, if they are going to get the approval of the subjects to participate, or if they're going to look at your data, they need to be listed. So then they have to have that 4 or 5 hour city training. The new form incorporates the conflict of interest form, so it'll actually just be part of that electronic form, so you don't have to go find another form.
If you're collaborating with somebody from another university that does not use city training, what is the
They have to. Somebody there is going to have to do it. If you do the proposal here, if you can do a proposal for Tarleton that gives you access to everything you need, and the committee thinks that's fine, then you can keep them out of it. But more than likely, if it's their project to start out with.
But what if I guess, let me word that different. If I'm the PI on a project and running it through Tarleton, and have somebody from another university collaborating, do they have to have the city training? Even if that's not the one they utilize within their system?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Bruce Whitney has decided that that is the official training. And our audit will have every single proposal with every researcher. They will look that do they have city training. We have no way of knowing if somebody is collaborating with you externally, but we would assume that PIs would act in good faith to disclose if that was going on.
Right, and my question, I'm asking for a colleague who wasn't able to be here today, is along those same lines. So they've gone through the IRB process at the other university where the collaborators are, and going through the IRB process here. The IRB process, they've already been approved with their IRB process at the other university with training that she says is with a higher research standard than city. but then we're still making them go through this 5-hour training, even though they already have a training that supersedes the city training.
I would think that we can have Mecca investigate
Okay.
if that truly is reasonable for the system.
Okay.
And I'll ask Dr. Whitney to give us a ruling of what training would he consider superior or more intensive than city training. And I think that's a reasonable request.
Thank you.
But before we did city training, if we participated with other institutions that use city training, we had to do that. So it was a reciprocal in the opposite direction before we used. So this is not a new protocol necessarily.
So Mecca actually assigns review to members. We typically have teams, and different members of the committee are paired up together, and we tend to talk about the proposals. Depends on the team. I know my team tends to talk, and then we either get back to the PI or we ask Mecca to get back to the PI, and then the PI resubmits. Mecca now is so wonderful. Mecca now has a spreadsheet for me on Fridays, and it tells me where everything is. And so I don't have to go hunt and figure out where things are. We're working with another system to allow PIs to have access to get. I want to know where everything is. If I was a PI, I'd want to know where it is, and maybe I could contact, if I was really concerned that my time was running out, I could contact that person and say, hey, what can I do to move this forward? And so we're working to get that so PIs can do that. The online system will not do that, really. But Mecca is providing update to folks, and I'm going to give you our latest timeline of how we're turning things around. We've improved. And just having our people on the committee know where everything is and know that there's something in their queue, and having a timeline, a hammer over their head, it's moving things along. So it's improving. I wouldn't say it's as good as I'd like it to be, but it's better than it was a couple months ago.
Yes, ma'am.
And just having, we really haven't had administrative help at all, so this is helping a lot. Okay, so this is nice. Have any of you guys had a Mecca update? Because I have heard people that say they like it, and it's good. Then IRB, we do this form that we document the review. We put it in exempt or expedited category, and then there's a little summary at the end, and that's what we use to record our recommendations to our reviewers. To our PIs. Some reviewers actually just send, like I typically send my review form so you can actually see it. Some reviewers don't want their form sent, so you might just get a written list of recommendations. Leslie, do you remember what you did?
I don't. And I think we were doing it a little differently then.
Okay.
Where we were having to get the reviews together and
Right,
then send them.
right. And then providing the PI with recommendations and a timeline to let the PI know that if you get your recommendations back within this period of time, we're going to move forward with it in a certain period of time. So the PI fixes what they need to submits it to Mecca. IRB reviews the documents for the resubmission. Reviewer makes recommendations to me, and then I approve it. Occasionally, and this is a learning curve for everybody on the committee, occasionally recommendations go out to PIs, and then I get it, and there's something there that I just can't approve, that maybe the reviewers didn't notice or didn't see. Unfortunately, I'm really intimately involved with the audit, probably more than anybody else, so sometimes there's something glaring that maybe didn't get caught by the reviewers, and that's why even after you think you've fixed it, Mecca may call you up and say, hey, here's one more thing we have to have fixed. We have no doubt that every single one of our proposals will go under scrutiny, and PIs will get audited when they come back. Consent forms will get audited, the whole bit will go on. They'd have done that last time, but they feel like they needed to go that far. And then you complete the research, you maintain the required documents and statistics, you house those documents in the place where you told us you were housing them. If you leave the university, we need you to close out that project or explain what you're doing with all of that data. Have you notified your subjects if you're discontinuing the proposal or whatever? We have a new form that we're introducing today that is a closeout form. So your PIs will have to close out their projects. When the auditors came, one of the things they said, well, of these 3 years of proposals, how many are still going on? And we don't know. So I don't know if you remember Nona Williamson at the time. Nona was coordinating IRB, and Nona surveyed, and we couldn't even get the PIs to answer her back. And anyway, so basically we told the auditors, yeah, we understand they're in the wrong category, we don't know, and so on. So anyway, that's why we're doing that. We're going to have to know that these are getting closed out. The closeout form also lets you say how many subjects you actually enrolled and participated, and it asks you how many you were approved for. So if you were approved to have 100 subjects, but you enrolled 6,000, that's kind of a flag. If you were doing something to those subjects that potentially was more than minimal risk, you were poking them or doing something to them, and you said you were going to have 20 subjects, but you only had 2, and you had an unfortunate outcome, and you reported that, that's fine, and you halted that project, that's completely fine. What is not considered fine is kind of not telling the truth about your number of subjects, your population, because there has to be a minimum number of subjects to get scientific quantitative results. And so again, if you have a qualitative study, you can have 1 person, that's fine. You just have to tell us it's a qualitative study. But if you're saying I'm going to, do a quantitative study and I'm going to analyze this data and I really only have 3 people, that's a huge problem. That's one thing our committee has never really looked at is the population, but Dr. Bruce Whitney has said we have to look at that, and that is part of our charge, is to make sure when we approve a project that there's a minimal number of participants to make the study scientifically sound. So it's not something we really wanted to look at, but unfortunately we are, and we're doing our best to do that. A number of people will say things like, I don't have enough class time, and that's a big problem. We all have heavy teaching loads. I don't have enough time to do 20 subjects. I can only do 5. According to the government and OHARP and the A&M system compliance, that's not an excuse. What the idea is, you probably need to collaborate with someone else. Financial issues are not considered a reason to have a low number of subjects. And so that is something of controversy. I know that it's very different than the way the committee has acted in the past, but that's something we're dealing with. So again, the PI is going to do the completion termination document, store the documents related to the research for a potential compliance audit. All the members of the committee were adamant that the one thing we would not do is go to faculty offices and do an audit. And that was something that our audit said we really need to get out there and do, and look at consent and look at the whole picture. But anyway, that's what we have MECA for. And so don't be surprised if you have a current project or one that is nearing the end. If your project's funded, it's coming through Maestro, that you're getting that warning in 30, 60, 90 days. And anyway, don't be surprised that MECA asks you at your convenience, would you assemble your consent documents and anything related to your project, and she will come check it out that you truly are consenting your subjects and everything else. So we haven't moved on to that one yet, but it needs to come before the audit. And then again, the monitoring of compliance. So I think you have a handout. Dr. Schaefer gave you a handout of the human subjects decision charts. I'm going to go through those just real quick. and tell you the kind of the title of those charts. If you're new to this game or you've served where you actually weren't the one filling out the IRB proposal form, you were under someone else as a PI, you may not have had to go through and make that decision under which category your research actually falls, but these forms are really wonderful. And then again, the city training we've already covered. So the first thing is you have to make a decision about, is your activity research involving human subjects? I've already covered that pretty thoroughly. You can look if there are some nuances. This is not a totally black and white area. And so if there are specific questions, I would suggest you come read these charts first before you ask a question, because they're really good. And I know the committee refers to these a lot. This is where we get our federal regulations that we actually exempt your proposals. And so when we say, yes, I agree with this PI, I agree that Dr. Edwards is going to be exempt under a particular regulation, this is where we're getting it from. So you make that decision. Also, is this research occurring in an educational setting? If it is, and it talks about its normal education practices, you could not survey students on their sexual habits under this educational setting. That is not a normal educational practice. I use that as a pretty bold example. But again, we use this one a lot. And a lot of the things we do in our university involve looking at different modes of instruction, whatever. And certainly in the College of Education, there's a lot of that going on. We also can get exempt status because of surveys, interviews, and so on. You can go read that one if you think that your project falls under that category. Existing data and specimens, if they're publicly available, that will get you an exemption. And then again, back to your question originally, will it be recorded so that the subjects cannot be identified? That's what puts you under that category. Public service, I know that our social work folks actually work with community organizations a lot, and so some of their exemptions may exist under this category. Food and taste, maybe the ag folks, I don't know, maybe the ag folks have some food and taste things possibly that would put them under exemption. You can read that one. And then we move to another big category, expedited. You can look at that one. More expedited. And then this idea of consent. There are two things we need to consider, and I think they get confused. Waiving consent is something that is done very rarely. And the question that we ask is, can the project be carried out getting your subject's consent? And if it can be conducted getting consent, we're not going to waive consent. The Facebook thing last year, I don't know what month that happened in, where they actually gathered data from, Tony's probably all over this one, they gathered data, but the people didn't know. They are not subject to the common rule because they're a private company, so they're not even involved in the common rule. But anyway, more than likely, we are not going to approve waiving consent. What we do, I wouldn't say half the time, but maybe a third of the time or so if we are asked, is waive documentation of consent. So you want to do a survey and you're in a neighborhood and you run into someone and you want to talk to them about the quality of life in their neighborhood and you want to give them a survey, and the only thing linking the results of what they say on the survey to their personal identification is their documentation of consent, that would be a real reason to request waiver of documentation of consent. And so Granted, you might recognize their face again, you might have looked at the survey, but still, that separates the identity, and you really are protecting your subject. For some things, more than likely, you're going to want to have documentation of consent, that you truly did explain to that person. Sometimes you just need to give them a handout or a brochure that describes, it would be like your consent form, but you don't need to get it back from them. If you did it electronically, I don't know if you're thinking of doing your stuff electronically.
Well, like repositories.
Yeah, and so if the only thing linking the identity of that person is them signing the consent, you might just say, by checking here, I agree that I understand I have been explained all the risks of this particular proposal. Does that make sense? And so again, there's a big difference between waiving consent and documentation of consent.
Okay, now I have a question related to that. For example, in our discipline, we do a lot of work with the 4-H and FFA youth programs. So a lot of the surveys that may be presented are presented in classes that are in the normal scope of their everyday activity, that are non-identifiable. And based off our understanding of like the city training, as long as you have school consent to go into their classrooms and work with those groups and collect data, then that's as far as the consent has to go.
Correct, but you need to identify in your proposal that these subjects cannot be identified, and that if they did get identified, there would be no harm to them.
Okay.
And if you can convince us that they can't be identified,
Right.
because there's no link,
Okay.
that's all you need for that exemption. Any other questions on that one? Report. So again, I encourage you, if you think that it would facilitate your project to request waiver of documentation of consent, and that's the only thing that links to that subject, that's fine. I suspect it would be approved. So but that's that one there. So, okay, the proposal form. Dr. Schaefer, how do I get something that's down at the bottom that I can't see? Okay, Don, here's the pesky form.
Did you put that up there just for me?
I did. Okay. So quickly, I'll try to take you through this form. There's also a document out on the IRB website that talks about helpful hints. And so you might, when you fill out your form, you might go look at that helpful hint section. We've already discussed who can be a PI, and you can also have an activity director. And so the person that's actually, so say you had a grad student, educational leadership, they may have a grad student, that student cannot serve as PI, but they're probably going to be the activity director. Is that pretty common?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. We got social security number. Marilyn Metters is a compliance person, and evidently there was a social security number on here.
Yes.
Yes, one
We
of our
never go
students, I don't think faculty do anymore, but I think our student accidentally put hers on
Well,
there.
I think we got that off of here. Anyway, you need to go through and answer yes or no It is a really big deal. If you're doing human subjects research, you have to check yes. I think what happens is people save the forms and some people have checked no, so we get proposals that says no, it doesn't involve human subjects. MECA's going to send it right back to you and ask you to just check yes. So just make sure, you know, if you've got externally funded types of grants, you may have salary, you may have those types of things. Restrictions on publications, you just need to clearly tell us what those are and so on. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And you need to have those signatures also. And that's just the second page, deals with your investigators, the other
Social
people.
security number is still on there, but
Yeah, I thought we had those off there, but they need to be off. It needs to be the UIN or the student ID or the faculty UID, UIN, whatever we call it. We have asked the deans of the colleges if they would appoint a representative to review those proposals before they come to the IRB committee. And we're still collecting who all those people. I know Elaine Evans is cost, Tom Falkenberry is going to do education. I don't know about the other areas. If any of you want to do that, I'm sure we'd love to have you. If you guys want to do the business thing.
We're discussing that.
they're pointing at each other.
Get a lot of nasty emails, but you're gonna learn a lot.
That's the worst thing.
You'll learn a lot. Okay, so then on the third page of the form, we get into the risk category. We used to have a no risk. The system said no, we can't have no risk. So we got rid of the no risk category. I know many people feel that their project has no risk, but not a choice anymore. And benefit to subjects, we really need to just say, for most of our projects, it's no. The problem is, if you say yes, you must document that you demonstrated to your subjects how it benefited. So you've got to go back in the end and let them know, and that's another piece of the compliance puzzle that you have to document and we have to document. So more than likely, for most projects, you're going to say benefit to subjects no, but benefit to others yes. You almost always have to say benefit to others because the committee is going to have a hard time having a good risk-reward ratio if you say it's not going to benefit anybody. They're like, well, why are you doing it? So I would suggest, I mean, there are some projects that do benefit the people. I know, like the SOTIL cohort, that might have a very easily demonstrable benefit to those people that go through that whole process, the year or whatever. But for most of our projects, our surveys, most of the time the subjects really are not benefiting. If you look at those human to subjects charts, you can decide whether it's exempt, expedited, and full board review. If the committee thinks, your reviewers think it's the wrong category, they'll change it. And then we go in, here is the highly controversial section about subject populations. Our online form has added gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and we've added economically challenged.
The problem for us is that a lot of our students deal with campus data. So I guess technically it's data that came from human subjects, but it's campus data and it's reported as campus data. There are no individuals identified. So we would have no idea, because it's aggregate data from a campus, we would have no idea what to check on.
But you could check students. You could check normal subjects and students. That's what I would do if I...
Just those two things?
Well, you could assume in a normal college campus that you would probably have minorities, and you could potentially say Hispanic, African American, if those were the ones that, you know, were the biggest minority group. That's about all you could do.
What could you say, like on J where it says minorities, you have to specify, so you could just say as per campus population, because you
Yes.
don't know.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I have an online question for you. If you could go back up to page 1 for a second. There is a item about faculty salary. And we want to know, what does that indicate?
That would only be if you were getting external funding as a grant from somewhere else. You had an NIH grant or whatever, and part of that grant you were receiving faculty salary. That is kind of to alert Roger Whitney's shop. Certainly you would think the Office of Sponsored Project would be aware of external funding, but for example, my department has a foundation, and I might have a person, a faculty member that's getting funding that's not coming through the Office of Sponsored Project, it's coming from a foundation. Education may have some of that, I don't know. But I think it's to make the Office of Sponsored Projects aware to get them in Maestro so we can comply with the idea of not having more than 100% effort there.
So this is regarding the putting in the what type of review that we're requesting, and I'm just curious, it's kind of not our choice. So, I mean, we can plug in a check mark, but it really is the next level reviewer and then the next level reviewer. So
We would hope that you would investigate the decision charts
sure.
and attempt to place it in that category, and then have enough documentation there to convince the committee that it truly fit. And if you think about it, if you say, well, my project is within a university setting, normal educational practices or survey, I know that's exempt. I want to make sure I'm real clear when I go through the concise description of that project, that I make it clear that, yes, I'm just doing a survey, I'm not going to look at a focus group, and so on. And when I get to concise description, I'll talk about the who, what, when, where.
I have found, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but I have started to spit back the exact language from the policy with the number. From the policy, because I know the reviewers are looking for that anyway. They're going to have to document, oh, it's exempt because of 45 CFR 46.101, blah, blah, blah. And so I just look straight to the chart and pull it, and I use that exact language back.
And that's amazing.
And if that kind of thing exists, then that's a checkbox in an online form that I click 3 things and it tells me what it is.
It is.
And that way we're both on the same page without me putting in and saying, I believe this
It
is
is.
and you're going, no, it's not.
On the form it is, and actually on our
Okay.
review form, it's like that also. But that, we're getting there.
Cool.
But if your data is campus level data, you still use select students even though the units aren't actually students.
I
Like if
said-
you go to look at institutional research data from campuses, even though the unit of study isn't students, you still would select students. Okay.
So Sally, on that same vein, because I'm sorry I came in late, so you probably already answered this, but, so I've been asked to participate in a research study over a number of campuses, I forget what it is, 8 campuses, 10 campuses. Some of the people I'm collaborating with are in your position, but they want to use data that is freely available, but they want me to harvest it for our campus to, it's how many people are in a particular kind of class, and it's like stuff you get out of Texas Facts, but also is on the state of Texas website, it's there. They want to know, because I said, well, our IRB has been in a state of flux, and I say to them, you're going to probably have to go take the training and sign the IRB form for you, and they say, 3 of them say, well, we're the head of IRB and not in any of these other 7 campuses, because they don't want to take, our training, but it sounds like we're going to require them to do that. They'll probably kick
I'm
me
not
out.
familiar with your exact project. I know we just approved one that had, for Dr. Leach, that had other campuses. I don't remember all the details. We had the official approval. Can you?
It went through, so it was a project that was generated at the chancellor's meeting in Austin, and so it was a system collaboration, so that may have had something to do with it. Irma Harper has kind of led us through it, and she has close contact with Lewis Whitney. It went through Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and they were the lead organization, but then all the other system schools that are involved, and I think there's like 5 or 6 of us, have had to go through their institutions' IRBs separately. And some have just given a nod and said, if Corpus was fine with it, we are, and some have had different processes,
So in terms of-
including full review.
So in terms of ours, did we require the other 4 or 5 institutions to take city training for Tarleton?
It worked out that they had already taken city training, so
This
that
is,
really
this is,
was.
they may use something else, so then,
Yeah.
what?
If they're A&M system
We can talk
schools,
offline about this,
okay.
but that's kind of the issue is that, I mean, generally you would say, yes, they would all have to take it.
Contact me individually about that one. If they're A&M
Okay.
system schools, they're supposed to, I have been
No,
assured
this
that
is
they're
not, this
using.
is nationwide, this is
Okay.
Purdue and.
Well,
North
maybe
State.
if we were addressing this question earlier, if they had a higher level of training that was more intensive than city, we can, we're going to ask Dr. Whitney for a list of trainings that he would consider
But we probably need to see that, though. Okay,
proper.
okay, that's
Or
that's
some
that's
kind of
resolution.
statement to defend this idea that they have had is just as intensive training.
Okay, great.
Okay, I gotta get going. This one. Sex of subjects, age range. We need to know how many people you want to put in your study. We need to know that you've thought about powering your study. And so when you explain what you're going to do, if you're going to do a qualitative study, the committee's probably not going to look at how many people. You want to survey somebody online in India about do they drive to work, do they ride their bike to work, things like that. That's fine if you just have 3 or 4 subjects and you want to have a narrative. If you're doing a quantitative study, you've got to have a minimum number of subjects, and there's a number of ways that you can get there. You can extend your study over a couple of years. You can use the same people for pre and post, but more than likely the committee is not going to approve anything for a quantitative study with less than 20. And there's some instances where it would have to be a lot more. I'm not the math person, and I'm not the one that even makes these decisions, but in general, Dr. Schaefer was saying in education it's typically 30 people. In the laboratory, if I'm looking at identifying a normal range, I'm never going to look at less than 20 or 30 people to be my population. So again, that has to be appropriate to you, but in the past, the committee has never looked at the number of people. We're like, if you want to deal with 2 people, that's your business. We're being forced. This is something we haven't looked at, and they consider this very important in making decisions about risk and benefit. So again, make sure your subject, you have enough subjects to demonstrate whatever you need. For some things, you need a lot more people. And then you need to tell us if you're going to break them into experimental control, your duration of study, how long, are you going to ask them for an hour of their time? Are you going to ask them for 30 hours of their time? Are you going to pay them? The system now has a policy on paying people, paying students to do studies and surveys, and I think it's about $10 an hour, and I know A&M is not approving students getting paid. If you have to drive 3 hours to get somewhere, they'll pay you for that time, but in general, they're limiting the amount just so you can't select a specific population. And then if they withdraw, will you prorate it? You just need to let them know that, and you need to let the committee know that. All these other questions that are not pertinent for survey research, we're going to skip over the radioactivity. We hope we're not doing that to any people. If you have a cooperating facility, we need a letter. We don't need their IRB approval. We simply need a letter saying Dr. Edwards is working with Fort Worth ISD to make students more aware of health professions, and he's doing some kind of survey with their students and then looking at, do they matriculate into our programs or whatever. He just needs to have Fort Worth ISD write a letter saying, I agree to cooperate on a study named so-and-so involving, and so on. It doesn't have to be anything extensive. Social work group does a lot of cooperating facilities with different cities, different organizations, and so on. Sometimes the problem is that cooperating facility won't give you a letter till they see your approval.
That is what we're going through right now with Fort Worth.
Well, we just did that where we've had a workaround on that one. So please just contact Mecca and she'll talk to me and we can get a workaround on that one. That is a real problem. I had the same thing with the VA. But we should be able to come with, I don't even remember what the workaround was. I think we said,
but they told her to get our approval first, and then when they got our approval, they would give her their.
And we said that's what it was. We said, we'll just caution you to not start your research until you have please submit the cooperating facilities. People on the committee said, don't tell everybody that, we won't get any of them. But I would just ask, if you can get the letter, get it up front, but your approval will be conditional upon receiving that cooperating facilities letter.
Is an email exchange good enough between, say, a superintendent of a school and yourself? Is that good enough for approval?
Yes, as long as it has identifiable information on there on who the person is. I mean,
Sure.
it couldn't be a cryptic little note, but something that we could easily identify, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions on that one? That's a pain, definitely. And so again, we're moving into the main body, the purpose, the background. On the background, we do not need a dissertation. Please caution your graduate students not to cut and paste from their dissertation and all the background. Just give us a good paragraph that makes us understand the importance of your research question, and it'll help us focus. The more clearly you can communicate with us what you're trying to do and who you're going to do it to and how you're going to do it, how you're going to analyze your results and communicate those, the quicker your committee. It's so amazing. There are big differences in the readability of proposals. And if we can, and some really short proposals are moved through very fast, and then some proposals are extremely lengthy, and literally 4 or 5 of us will read it, and we're like, I have no clue what they're going to do. So again, you need to decide what you're going to do, who you're going to do it to, how many you're going to do it to, before you make your proposal. And you need to know that. The concise, what I would suggest for this area is the who. Who are your subjects? You need to tell us who they are, where you're going to get them, and how you're going to get them. So sometimes you have a classroom, you have a class and you are going to recruit your classroom. Sometimes you're going to go out to in front of the library and put up a desk. Whatever communication, whether it's the oral speech that the teacher gives to their class or it's the email letter, we need to have that recruitment document. We need to be able to know that you told them the truth about the project and how you're going to get your subjects. Obviously, sometimes if you're getting institutional data from Mike Haynes' shop, you really don't need that. If it's existing data, that's not an issue. But again, tell us who they are. I have called PIs before when I could not tell who the subject was, and they said, well, I really don't know. It could be this one or this one, and so you just have to make a decision and tell us who they are. And then you have to tell us what you want to do, whether it's a survey, focus group, intervention, you're going to stick them, prod them, poke them, whatever you're going to do to them. And make it clear about the risk. For most of our Tarleton research, it's pretty minimal risk. I would say for most of our research, psychological harm would be, or loss of, if that identity of the subject got out there, it could be embarrassing or cause personal issues. So again, just make the risk clear and tell us what you're doing to mitigate the risk. And that should be good enough. You need to tell us how long, if you're going to bring them all in a room and do something to them, how long it'll take, any possible bad side effects, and then you need to tell us what you're going to do with the data, how you're going to analyze the data. We need to know that, and it lets the committee know that you have thought about your project and your project is worthy of using human subjects in that effort. And then that's very important to the system, that we are able to document, that the PI documents that their analysis.
I have a question from an online participant. If the data is collected in the classroom setting for internal use, but then later this data may be used for publication purposes, when is the correct timeline to submit IRB protocol?
Well, if they had known they wanted to publish, they should have done it up front. That's the answer, is that if you suspect you want to use it, we would encourage you to do that up front. If not, you might fall under the existing records documentation, and the big key is, can this person be identified, and can you come to them if they're identified?
And related to that, if your students are going to, where essentially they select a project based on certain parameters, you don't necessarily know the exact topic at the beginning of the semester, is there a way to submit an IRB that sort of is all-encompassing, or no?
No, because the potential for those projects to carry different risk. And without the committee knowing what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and so on, and what the possible side effects, they can't make a decision. So they would never approve something with that type of approval. That being said, I could get approval to use unidentified blood samples because nobody can be harmed with that. We have no way, even if I publish some horrible genetic data, that would, that still can't harm a human subject. Is that?
Well, I mean, if the topic is something that's not that personally identifiable, or
The committee will not, that would actually come back, it would never go to a reviewer. MECA would put it back to the PI because it wasn't complete. They have to know the who, what, when, where of that whole project. And then again, where you're going to store your data. If you are not de-identifying your people originally, but you're keeping links, you need to keep it somewhere safe on your computer. You just need to say it's in a locked faculty office. No one except the research team has access to it. That's all we need to know. You don't need to say, I carry my computer home in my car. It does sit in my car sometimes, but I lock my car. We don't need all that. We just need a statement that says that I am doing my best to protect the identity of my subjects, and that's good enough. I know everybody's really good at that one. And then again, if you checked off benefit to subjects, you need to tell us here how you are going to let your subjects know what the benefit was, if you did check that off. I think I covered anything. Any other questions on that one? Criteria for inclusion and exclusion, you can figure that out. You just need to tell us if you're going to survey students in a freshman English class. I will exclude all students that are not in freshman English class. I will include all students that choose to participate in the freshman. We've had a bunch of PIs that say, no, they have to participate. We can't do that. And so if you choose to make it human subjects research, that must be up to the subject to choose to participate. That's the big key here, is they have to be allowed. If you want to make them participate in something as a part of their grade, and it is the same thing as the project, you can't make them participate. You can make them participate in something, a survey, as part of the grade. For example, all my students at clinic have to do preparation surveys, surveys about their clinic site, and so on, and that's part of their grade. They don't pass if they do it. But I can't make them do that if I'm going to use it as human subjects research. I cannot make them, you can't make someone participate.
So for instance, if I'm using journal prompts in my research, but the journal prompt is a part of the course assignment, you're telling me that if I include that journal prompt as part of the course assignment where they're going to be a grade, they're going to be graded, and so are highly encouraged to do that because their grade depends on that, that I can't use that for research?
You just have to tell them, and you have to ask whether they want to be included. That's if they can be identified. You can also go back to the exemption where you can't link them and you want to use an aggregate, a mean score of this population against that population. That would also put you in the exempt category. But if they're identifiable, like my grade on your paper was correlated with something else, you have to tell me I'm participating and I have to choose to participate.
Could, in that situation, if you have journal prompts, let's say A and B, and A decides to participate and B doesn't, could you include both for the grade, but take, who did I say, the one that didn't participate, drop them out of the research?
Yes.
So only B.
Definitely.
analyzed.
Definitely.
So that's, okay.
Definitely, but it's
Okay.
just the whatever portion is research, you can't make people do it. They must have autonomy, they must make that decision themselves.
Can you also give them the alternative of either doing the participating in the survey or an alternative assignment which is not part of the research?
Yes.
So it's a class requirement.
Yes, and that's a great idea too. The auditors were concerned, we had a couple projects where we had alternative, but the alternative assignments were ridiculously long and terrible compared to the 5-minute survey. So naturally you skew your student, I'll just go ahead and do this even though I really don't want to do this. And so it has to be something that is equivalent. And that's kind of black and white too, but, that's kind of gray too, but anyway, we have a lot of people that have alternate assignments. There certainly are ways that you can encourage students, and I think just letting them know that their personal information is not going to get tied to anything you're going to publish. The teacher already knows their grade anyway. I think if you explain that to them, they're much more likely to say, yeah, you can use my data, or ours have anyway. Sources of research material, we do not want your bibliography here. This is reworded this is a kind of goofy way to say it, but what we want is, if you're doing a survey, tell us you're doing a survey and say, please see attached survey, or if you are given a test, some people do some amazing tests, you need to give us the test, a link. Some of the education folks do big national tests, and so on. We need the actual test. We actually had some proposals that were approved last year and they had links and the links were broken and the auditor said, you didn't look at this. And so there's always the potential for a link to get broken. That being said, if there's 3,000 questions, I'm not sure, that's a different story. We'll deal with those individually. You have to tell us where you're going to get your subjects, and we need the recruitment brochure, email, if that is appropriate. Mike Haynes had a project, one of the Nessie or Bessie or whatever surveys, and he had freshmen, we survey as a university freshmen about their engagement in learning, and then we survey them again as seniors. And so he had tons of freshman students in classrooms across the campus, and he couldn't get there to consent them all. So he did a video and he broadcasted it, and they were connected, and he allowed them to ask questions about the project. At that time, he addressed the questions to all of, I don't know if you were part of this thing, but it worked amazing. It was amazing. He did this great little video, so he's very proud of it too. So if you are interested in doing something like that, you have people off campus, whatever, I'm sure Dr. Schaefer can work with you to make it work so you don't have to be there. And that still enables you to check the box, will anyone other than a researcher consent the subjects? And then you can say, no, a researcher is consenting, even though he's not there with them at that particular time. So I think you could do a video. Some people have suggested you do a video, and then you say, if you have questions, please opt out of the project. And so if you're online, if you're doing hundreds of people, that
You can
might be.
also do a Zoom session like we're doing now.
Exactly. So I think there are ways that you can get around the logistics of your subjects being in multiple locations. Special precautions, if your subjects are not de-identified and there's a risk to the subject for their information getting out there, somebody doesn't want everybody to know they got a D in a class or something like that, you just need to explain what you're doing to protect your subjects. That's all that's necessary there. And that includes, we're kind of melding these two questions, the special precautions and confidentiality. They'll be all included. There has to be a potential benefit or the committee will not approve it. So it doesn't matter, that benefit may not be realized at the end of the study, but there has to be a reason to conduct the research or the committee is not going to think the risk-benefit ratio is appropriate. And then you tell us what you think we're going to get out of it. And then this is just a sample consent form. We actually have a form out there that talks about the essential elements of consent, and you can make your own consent form. You don't have to use this form. And so I think in the future, some people may not find that they may find this form cumbersome. So it really, this is out there to kind of help lead you to a form that's going to get approved. But again, it might not be appropriate for your research. And so in that form, you have to tell people what you will be asked to do, and it needs to be in layman's terms. If you have another population that doesn't speak English, I'm doing some research in Mexico, we have to have all of our consent documents in Spanish. Actually, when talking in Spanish. And so on, the signatures. And then you need to attach things like the conflict of interest, which will actually be part of this proposal. Your survey, your test, anything else, your letter, your cooperating facility letter, and so on. So that's pretty much all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be glad. A lot of stuff, a long way here.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you go over the qualifications for the PI?
Sure. It's got to be faculty or staff at Tarleton or a person who has a research appointment
What
at
about
Tarleton.
affiliate faculty? Because like my department, so I'm with military science and we're all affiliates.
Yes, those affiliates are, they have an official appointment here. They have an appointment letter, correct?
We were all in process with Dr. Snyder. I'm not
I can't
sure.
remember who did, I did a project with the VA, and it really was their project, and so I had to get that person that was leading that project appointed with a research appointment at Tarleton. The Office of Sponsored Projects, Roger Whitty and Dr. Snyder helped me do that, and we simply got that person an appointment in research.
Oh, okay. So that's through Dr. Snyder?
I would start with Dr. Whitty, Dr. Little, Dr. Whitty, that's where I would start. But the letter actually came through academic affairs because that's where all of our faculty contracts are issued.
Oh, okay.
So eventually Dr. Schneider got involved, but Office of Sponsored Projects can help you.
Okay. And next question, I think you said if it's a class project without publication and it's not research, what are the standards for publication? Because like in COLFA, it's very different than we're under School of Criminal Justice, so it's like two different standards. What's like if someone's going to write a newspaper article, is that publication?
Are you trying to disseminate
generalizable results. So there are numerous medias that you could disseminate those results. Maybe a newspaper article is being used to disseminate those results and educate people, maybe, but maybe not. So I could have some research, I could have something I'm doing, and somebody may want to write an article about my students. I had a bunch of students out with the Ebola mess going on in Presby. So they could write an article about that, and maybe we were starting to do some research, but I didn't disseminate the generalizable results of my study. So say I was doing, I'm just making this up, I wanted to say, ask my students, do you feel that our school prepared you for dealing with Ebola patients appropriately? And somebody wanted to write an article about that, but they're not really disseminating the findings of my study. That's not a publication on my research. But if I give them all of my data and I go tell that person that's writing the article, 80% of our people felt like they were trained really well, but 20% of them said they felt inadequately trained. That is disseminating those results to the generalizable public. We tend to think of journals as peer-reviewed, and that's another level, but I think it's kind of a gray area. In general, I would say meetings at a state, local, or national level, or peer-reviewed journals in general. But there are some other publications that have research results. And can you give me an exact example?
Well, okay, so for the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, the standard is a little higher of what constitutes publication. So like some of the other departments, publication is like a drawing or writing a book or something else that doesn't fit with our school or my department. So what's the standard for publication?
Well, the committee would have to make that final judgment, but I would say a book is an example of disseminating generalizable results. The population that reads the book might not be looking with the same scrutiny as it would a peer-reviewed journal, for sure, because they assume it's the opinion of the author or the compilation of the authors, whatever. But it still is disseminating generalizable results.
Wouldn't that have to also do with the human subject component? If you're writing a book on a historical figure for publication and dissemination, there are no human subjects.
Right, so it goes back, exactly. It goes back to it's not even human subjects research.
Right. Or a fiction or a book of poems, which is a legitimate publication out of the School of Liberal and Fine Arts, but it's not human.
I assume you're asking, though, that you've already made the decision that it's human subjects in research.
Right, we're getting new faculty members, and one of the requirements from the Army side is that they publish to military magazines, stuff like that. And so if they wanted to include data from Tarleton, then we still need to go through the IRB process.
Especially if you use a data set, I think what she's saying is if you have a data set that you're disseminating via that publication and drawing conclusions from it, or even suggesting, it sounds like it needs an IRB.
Right, and the proposal just needs to say, where am I getting my data from? So it's coming from institutional effect, it's coming from Mike Haynes' shop. He's going to have to get you access to that data, probably. Maybe not, but in general, the university assumes that faculty will go through that shop if they're using that data in a publication. So, for an example, in the lab world, we have a national lab educators meeting, and our faculty might use some of their research in different methods or whatever. If I'm just going to go do a poster at that meeting, I need an IRB. Now, I may use previous data that is not identified And so, but I still have to go do a proposal and say, yeah, it meets the exempt category because nobody's been identified, nobody can get harmed, and so on. So I would have to know exactly, if you're talking about a military publication that potentially people outside of your department could see, I would think you would need to put something together. I think you could easily do it, kind of have a template, and just cut and paste in your template as needed.
Okay.
Can you talk about the timeline improvements since Becca's came on board and whatnot? I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Mecca typically gets these proposals a number within 24 hours when they come in, unless it comes in at 4:30 on Friday afternoon, and she probably won't deal with it till Monday morning. If she is out, and you know she's having a baby, we'll be without Mecca for a little while, but we will actually have Leah back to helping us. But she assigns it typically within 24 hours to 2 reviewers. The reviewers have 2 weeks, and every week we get a little reminder from Mecca, hey, you know, Sally, you got this pending out there, you need to get this review done. And so maximum should be of 2 weeks of that. And then during that time, they should also either get their recommendations back to Mecca or communicate to the PI what changes need to be with the resubmission. We expect that the PI within a week should turn it around, and if they meet all of the recommendations, we can approve it in a week, so we're looking at a month. If the PI sits on it, we have a number of people that sit on it for months and months. Mecca has notified people that after about a month or more that we're going to terminate these and you'll have to resubmit. She's been really lax, like, please don't do this. Hold off, but I think the ones that we actually have pending out there have been numerous resubmissions and the PI just refuses to make the required changes for the board to approve it. But that in general is about a 1 month. Again, should take 2 weeks for those reviewers. If you can get your stuff back in a week, we should be able to turn it around in a week. Let Mecca know if you think there's something, you know, somebody's been sitting on your thing, or ask her to find out where it is. She will be happy to tell you your reviewers, and you can bug them. And I guarantee you that works. If somebody, no, I'm serious, it really does work. If somebody, you know, if Dr. Edwards has a proposal and he's like, Sally, this got assigned to you 2 weeks ago, is there a problem? I'll immediately go in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to do Tony's review. And so I really think it does work. Just having Mecca give us that weekly, we have a spreadsheet and all of us are on there, that helps immensely. Do you have one hanging out there?
I was just curious about the timeline. So, you know, if we're trying to get something in and we've got a publication date in mind and we're trying to get this, we have to back that timeline up and
that's
have a
the
good idea of.
You know, when Dr. Leach is submitting something, because she was on the committee and she knows exactly, you know, what we're expecting right now, it may go to 2 reviewers and it may go very quickly. And usually they have a couple recommendations and she fixes that and she understands what they're getting at and so on. Other people have other constraints like cooperating facilities that they can't get what they need. You need to let Mecca know, and she will let me know. It's a new day every day. Somebody always has something that's a little different, you know, and so we will do our best to make sure we can comply with the system and, you know, meet the audit and meet your needs also. And I said one example is like, well, we'll go ahead and approve it without the cooperating facilities letter, but you can't start your research till you submit that to Mecca. We have somebody, I can't remember what they were doing. What do you call the sampling when you get one and then that one lets you know? What do you call that? Yeah. So that's not familiar in my area, but anyway, what we said was all you have to do is get a cooperating facilities letter for the first one, and then as you add people, just submit the letter to Mecca, and we'll, you know, assume that you keep up with that, and if you get audited, you better have all those cooperating facilities letters, because they were using community organizations in a particular city. So I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. If they can't identify who all their cooperating facilities are initially, I think that's reasonable. So we'll do our best.
So the system potentially will be auditing specific research proposals?
They would, well, they did it last time, they actually, well, it was just so bad, they didn't, well, you can't imagine, it was 3 days from, you know where, but they didn't go into the depth, because when they realized the list of 3 years of projects, and okay, we got the little folders here, there had never been an IRB meeting. They were all approved. They were in the wrong category, so we had, I think, 3 on prisoners, and they were exempt. Children, pregnant women, exempt. And so immediately, those got thrown in the pile of, oh my goodness. Then when they started going through, they were like, you're approving a quantitative study with 2 people. That was high on the list also, is the number of subjects powering your study. There were studies that the concise description didn't explain, and they actually asked me, what are these people going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen the project before. I never knew it was approved. I never, I'm like, I don't know what they're going to do. So the clarity of the committee, understanding what you're going to do to the subjects, and us documenting that truly this meets that exempt statute or the expedited, that's it. And yes, they will. They didn't need to last time. They were just so overwhelmed that we were so
Well,
bad.
in the defense of the committee, if the committee never met, then the committee members never saw potentially
No.
the proposals that got approved to say those were.
No, the committee didn't, but that being said, the former chair was a good friend of mine, and this compliance has never been supported. And to do a good job, you have to have people, that are working to do this. We have never had an audit for the biosafety or the IACOP, the animal protection. So those are coming, and the people involved are working very, very hard. Hopefully the IRB story will not be repeated. But if those audits had come at the same time, it probably would have been somewhere. And so you can go talk to A&M system members that have been audited, and like A&M's been going through this. They went through this a couple years ago, 5 years ago. There are plenty of schools that haven't been audited yet, and they're like, we don't have to do this. And we're like, we used to be like that, but it's different now. So yes, they will. They would have gone to our PI's offices and looked at consent or whatever, but they had so many other issues that it took them 3 days just to formulate.
So when they come back, they may look.
I think they will. I think if they don't, they'll require our documentation that we looked, that MECA is. Our plan right now is certainly if somebody has an unexpected occurrence, that would be something that would be investigated. Did you do everything you said you were going to do? When we get the form to close out proposals, we'll probably pick a certain percent and audit those. Not all of them, but just randomly, MECA will pick some and audit those. That's what we're looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis.